Okay, welcome back to stage 2, I guess, of the Audit and Governance Committee meeting. Please note that Councillor Fitzgerald has unfortunately had to leave the meeting at this stage, but without further ado, we move on to the delivery plan for corporate fraud, corruption and compliance strategy. And Libby, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This report is primarily in two parts. It covers the recommended delivery plan, which will sit under the Fraud, Corruption and Compliance Strategy covering 24 to 28. That was approved by Audit and Governance in March 2024. And the second part of the report provides an update on the work undertaken, which is shown under Section 3. As set out in the report, the delivery plan provides the mechanism for implementing the aims and objectives of the Council's fraud strategy, and I consider this to be a robust framework to provide members with the assurances on how we are managing the authority to the risk of fraud and corruption, which is a core function of the Audit Committee as set out in your terms of reference and sit for guidance. The approach we have taken in producing the delivery plan is set out under section 1.2 of the report, and it takes account of the 5 pillars which we committed to do within our strategy, which is under the Fighting Fraud, Corruption Locally strategy, which and the self-assessment checklist, which is included under part 4 out of the FFCL strategy. Outstanding recommendations from SWAP and Grant Thornton. Specific risk areas as highlighted in the SWAP report, and a number of these sit within my service areas such as business rates, council tax as well, and the delivery plan has had input from Council Section 151 and our monitoring officer as well as SWAP in bringing this together. We recognise that this needs to be a living document and that audit and this committee has greater visibility of this work and the opportunity to provide feedback to help inform our approach. This is a key commitment that was set out in our strategy, which was approved back in March. As we progress, more requirements and actions will be added, and that we'll need to take account of new and emerging risks, fraud risks, changes in legislation, and also follow up on actions that will come from various actions within the current delivery plan, such as the updated fraud risk assessments. Regarding the delivery plan, there are currently 29 requirements with 49 actions against them. Majority of the actions fall under the governance and acknowledge pillars, but what is important to recognise is that as we progress, then we're more likely to see the balance shift into other areas such as prevent, pursue and protect. There are 33 actions as part of the FFCL checklist, and 25 of those have been incorporated into this delivery plan. The second part of the report is to provide members with an update on the work that's been undertaken to date, and to also provide that assurance that whilst the delivery plan has been developed, work has still been happening in relation to fraud and compliance. And summary of the work that's been undertaken is provided under section 3. Again, we have reflected the outcomes using the 5 pillars. I think points to highlight under the second part of work that's been undertaken is the single person discount review for council tax. This was part of a wide Devon-wide approach. It was something we highlighted back in March, that work that we were going to be undertaken, and the outcomes of that is set out in the report. It's come out slightly higher. It was anticipated that it would generate around a 2.5% error rate, when in fact we came out slightly higher than that at 2.9%, and the financial outcomes of that work is included. We know from our strategy that council tax discounts and exemptions are one of the fraud risks in relation to public sector fraud. And obviously with single person discounts being our largest claim discount within council tax, both in terms of number and the value, claiming it is important that we undertook that review as part of this area of work. Business rates continues. We still do the work around the RV finder as well as doing small business rate relief review, and again there's outcomes on a complex rating matter on that. Business rates and council tax are the council's two main income streams, so it's really important that we are protecting and taking measures in relation to fraud and error. And in addition, we've highlighted safeguarding our housing stock is also another key area for this council, in particular under the right to buy, and ensuring that only those applicants that are entitled to purchase under that scheme are able to. In summary, this work has resulted in the equivalent of 2.65 million of public funds either being recovered or protected, and East Devon's share equates to just over £500,000. So just turning to the recommendations, the first is to improve the delivery plan, and the second is to allow for delegated authority for us to continue to update the delivery plan to ensure it remains responsive in new areas of work we identify during the year. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Committee, any questions on this report? Councillor Levine.
Thank you, Chair. Can we console ourselves that the amount of fraud is small rather than very significant?
I think in terms of that answer, I'd like to think that it will be relatively small. When you look at the single person discount, the percentage error, it is always going to be small. It doesn't mean to say we're immune from it, and we still need to take measures to protect the council and to mitigate that risk of fraud and error. So yes, we can take comfort that what we're identifying is relatively low percentages, but I would expect that to be similar across the sort of landscape, not just with our authority, and it will be prevalent in different areas more.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Goodman.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. Two or three things really. First of all, Satya, I'm thinking, and I know we went through fraud previously, we must have had something in place within the council before to tackle fraud. I can't believe we didn't. And is all this now really making it more formal? I think many officers could learn a lot from what you say in 2.1. This is a living document. I don't see that enough because an action plan is a living document. It will change, and I commend you for actually outwardly saying that, because I think people need to recognise you do an action plan today, but it could change tomorrow, and I think you recognise that in your report. I had a similar question to what's just been asked, is that when you actually read some of these figures that you've identified, is that the norm? Is it higher than what we would expect? And I don't know whether internal audit can help us there. And finally, if we hadn't put this in, of checking fraud in this way, the money that we recovered, would we not have recovered that money? Thank you.
There's quite a lot in there, packaged in one question. But yeah, Libby, would you like to address some of it or all of it?
Thank you. I think in terms of, so if we just take the single person discount review as an example, if we hadn't have undertaken that review, no, we wouldn't have been able to identify that. Because people's circumstances can change. So at the time they make an application, they're entitled to it, but they've, for one reason or another, forget to notify that their circumstances have changed. And so using external, like we've done in this case, has highlighted that there is error. It is recognised as highlighted in our strategy that these are risks to the council when we talk about public sector fraud. So they are there. So the percentage in terms of how we were just slightly over, but it was marginal in terms of we had a 2.9% error rate as opposed to 2.4. So there's nothing, I would say, over alarming that our controls and processes aren't in place, but using different tools in order to identify that error is really important, that we do exercise this like this periodically. There is work, in answer to your earlier question, that whether this work has been going on and we do stuff. I think what this does is provide that framework, but also ensures that we are targeting resources into those identified high risks. So having a fraud strategy is absolutely critical in the council, having a framework, and the delivery plan sits as part of this, to making sure that we are recognising those fraud risks, that we are developing our fraud maturity around how we respond to that, and making sure that our controls will sometimes need to be updated to reflect new and emerging risks. And we know things like cyber fraud and all of those areas mean that we do need to continue to keep this alive and ensure that we're, as the scams become more sophisticated, that we understand those and we're protecting the public purse from that. So hopefully that's answered your questions.
Thank you. Excellent. Any other questions for Libby? Okay, thank you, Libby. It's for this committee to approve the delivery plan as part of the corporate fraud and compliance strategy for 24 to 28, which will be reviewed and reported on annually, and for delegated authority to be given to the Assistant Director responsible for fraud and compliance to update the delivery plan during the year to take account of changes in legislation, new and emerging fraud risks, or auditors' recommendations, which will be done in consultation with the Director of Finance and Director of Governance. Those are the recommendations. Is everyone happy with those? Do we have a proposer? Councillor Goodman and seconder. Councillor Levine, seconding. Happy days. All right, all those in favour, please. Any against? And any abstentions? Councillor Collins abstains. Thank you very much. Thank you, Libby. Much appreciated. So we move on to item 14, the self-assessment of good practice against SIPFA's position statement, audit committees in local authorities and police 2022. Thank you. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So members will remember from the training we did, we referenced the SIPFA's position statement, good practice. Said I'd go away and look at the checklist, which I've done, conferred with the Audit and Governance Chair. So gone through that checklist, made an assessment of where I think the committee is against those best practice elements. So the first thing is to reflect on that, whether the committee believe we've got an accurate picture there in terms of where I think the assessment is. And then I've picked up in the main body of the report some improvements that I believe that need to be addressed, bearing in mind that best practice checklist. So they're on page 139. I suppose we take it in two parts, Chair. First, do we think the checklist, I've completed it accurately as far as the committee is concerned? And then secondly, if I've picked up the right areas for improvement. So the checklist starts on page 141.
Okay, over to the committee. Thoughts on the checklist? Completion? Happy with it and the content? With the microphone, please.
Any checklist is subjective. My only comment would be on some of them, I think you were right when you rated it maybe 3 or 4 months ago, but I think this committee has come a long way over the last 6 months, and I think some of those, hopefully next time, would have moved to the right, because I've noticed some real significant improvements.
Okay. Happy with that comment as well?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And if there's no... Councillor Levine?
Could I just say that Councillor Goodman and I are on the members' development group, and I think we could, if you have any ideas of how we can improve the training for this committee, then I think that's the place to send them to, so that we can arrange them.
Thank you. And then we move on to, if there's no other questions on the checklist itself, on the recommendations that Simon's identified.
So I don't know if you want me to go through those. Yeah. Or, yeah. So the first one there is regarding good practice. An annual report and evaluation should be published to Council on how the Audit Committee has complied with its responsibilities, including key issues to be highlighted to Council. Already discussed and raised, I think that actually came from the chair himself in terms of doing an annual report to council on behalf of this committee's work and any areas to highlight. So I think that was already in train, but certainly hits the mark in terms of the recommendation. The next one, again, was a specific one, annual evaluation of the work, so it's very similar, and I think an annual report will tick that one off. The next one, this committee will be familiar with in terms of good practice is to have independent members sitting on the committee. That was agreed a long time ago, been put in the constitution. The good news is the chair will be sitting down, hopefully in front of someone and interviewing them on the 10th of December. I think so. Yeah, I think it's lined up. So we are making progress now in terms of appointments to the Committee for Independence. The next one there is, did you do the committee? Oh yeah, this is an interesting one. So I hadn't picked up on this in terms of an area that we hadn't been addressing in terms of I didn't realise it was good practice. But I've spoken to both our internal auditors and external auditors. So this is about the committee meeting independently with audit without officers being present. So what we've agreed is 6 monthly before a committee meeting. That time will be given where you'll have access to Lisa and Peter just for a quick discussion before the actual committee meeting. Oh dear. And those were the areas that I picked up in terms of where we needed to make improvements. So I guess it's whether you believe there's anything else or whether you're happy to endorse those areas.
Committee, any comments? Happy with those recommendations?
Sorry, just wondering, Chair, whether or not some of the things Simon has just said, should that go in as recommendations rather than look at the report? Because I just, when I read your proposal having an audit and governance report annually, I think was absolutely spot on, because you have it from scrutiny overview, but not audit. Now that, I think, may have been an error in the past, but I think to identify that, because other councillors not here today, well, when this goes to full council, the minutes are accepted for council, they won't pick that up. But I wonder if you could pick up some of those key recommendations, which does demonstrate how much we've moved forward over the last year. Thank you.
So we are, I mean, if I understand you correctly, the recommendation that we're going to approve at this stage is if the improvement areas and actions identified are appropriate. So we are, in essence, accepting these improvement actions. I'm quite happy to be minuted to say, you know, I will undertake an annual report to the annual council in May, and also perhaps, you know, when these minutes are being presented at full council, then I can emphasise that point. Yeah, so happy with that. Yeah, yeah, Melanie.
I was just going to say that the member bulletin is a useful thing, that if you ever want to utilise that to promote something like that, we could put an article in there.
That may well be more appropriate, actually. Yeah, so yeah, let's do that, and I'll with you, Simon, we'll draft something for the member bulletin next week. Yeah, thanks. Great point. So if there's no other questions on this, is everyone happy for us to move to the recommendation? Consider the draft self-assessment of good practice and consider if it is reasonable assessment of where the committee currently is and if the improvement areas and actions identified are appropriate. Proposer for that? Councillor Levine. Seconder? Councillor Brown. All those in favour? Unanimous. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you again. So, to item 15, partnership policy report. So, report by Joanne Avery. Welcome, Joanne, Management Information Officer.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, committee. So this report is presenting to you a revised and updated partnership policy. So partnerships come to this policy once a year. Usually get a report just outlining where our partnerships are at, what partnerships we're involved in. However, we were the subject of a swap audit in terms of our partnerships, and following that they provided us with some great best practice for us to take on board, of which this policy that I'm recommending to you forms part of that recommendation, or part of that best practice. So we've borrowed with pride and updated the policy, made it our own, as it were, E7 policy, partnership policy for you to endorse. One of the reasons that we wanted to update our policy is to make our partnerships more transparent, also to have better management of them. So we're going to look to improve the way that we report them, as well as the way we manage them. So hopefully you've had excuse me, a chance to have a look over the policy and guidance, and also the process map that goes with it. We'll be looking to provide you with, once this is agreed, we'll be looking to provide you with an updated partnership register in the new year.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Any questions from committee? Councillor Goodman?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for this. A couple of things here. Do we anywhere define what a partner is? Because is it a formal partnership? Is it an informal partnership? And I just wondered if we could clarify that. The other thing is that on the main document, the partnership policy and guidelines, on page 8 of that document, it refers to a 3-risk matrix: high, medium and low. Well, we normally use a 4-tiered matrix for risk. And I'm just wondering if that needed to be updated once we agree the new risk policy going forward. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Goodman, when you say we normally, are you saying EDDC normally?
EDC normally use...
Okay. Microphone, sorry.
I also help other people with risk, but I've always used a 4, and I believe I'm right in saying the council used a 4, not a 3.
We're both trying to remember. I think it'd be consistent, Chair.
Yeah, that's all we need to.
Over to Joe. Yeah. Joe, you happy with that suggestion?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, more than happy. I will double check to make sure that we are consistent in terms of the risk issue. There is, in section 3, it does talk about what we view as a partnership, and also within the new framework that we'll have for each of the partnerships, we'll actually be asking for it to be noted whether they are a formal or an informal, or whether they're statutory partnership as well. So what we're looking to get is more information about the partnerships to put in our partnership register when they're formulated, so that we have a better understanding as to what type of partnership they are. So that should hopefully help us with that as well. Thank you.
Okay. If there's any other questions or comments? So with that proviso, Joe, subject to an amendment to a 4-point risk strategy amendment, are you happy if we make the proposal including that amendment? Yeah. So the recommendation is that Audit and Governance Committee considers and approves for adoption the refreshed version of our partnership policy with that minor adjustment. We have a proposer. Oh, Councillor Levine, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour? And any abstentions? Thank you, Councillor Collins. No one against. Thank you. Let's carry it. Thank you very much, Joe. Okay, we'll move on to the annual government statement for 23-24, and this is over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So picking up again best practice, previously with annual governance statements, what we've tended to do, the annual governance statements are produced annually, hence the name. We've gone through the full process. So you go through an internal review. Each assistant director produces a worksheet, if you like, in terms of assessment against key criteria for good governance. And we pick out sort of areas of risk or concern from that. So we go through that process. Myself and Melanie and also the chair consider the overview of governance within each of the areas in terms of the SIP for best practice. And it's a SOLIS document as well. So previously that forms part, well, it forms part of the accounts. So by signing off agreeing to the 21, 22, 22, 23 accounts earlier on your agenda, part of those accounts were the included was the annual governance statement for those years. Just to highlight, the problem with that is by us just presenting it with the accounts, this committee actually hasn't had then the 21, 22, 22, 23 annual governance statements in those years until the point you got the accounts. And because we've had that backlog on accounts, you haven't seen those statements until today officially. Good practice is actually to bring the annual governance statement separately for you to review in draft, and then we'll incorporate it into the statement of accounts when they come for signing. And actually that was one of the recommendations that was picked up from the peer review, that they were surprised looking back at the audit and governance agendas, they didn't see an annual governance statement presented. So bringing us up to date, you are now seeing, so this is the current annual governance statement that we've prepared for 23-24 for your comments. It will then, subject to any amendments, be re-presented to you in the accounts in January when we sign off the 23-24 accounts. So the statement itself, I can't remember, it's actually, yep, it's there in full. So you've got key areas that you would expect in all local authorities. So have you got a scrutiny committee? Have you got an audit and governance committee? Do you have an internal audit service? So key fundamental questions about the running of a local authority. Most, if they set up appropriately, you would tick those boxes if you like. But there are some key areas that you need to pick up and understand. And just to sort of help you, in terms of the report itself, what you've got in section 5 are prior year key areas. And then under section, so that's on page 152. So that should give you, okay, these were the key issues relating to our annual audit governance statement and how have we progressed against those. So you've got an update. And then what we're suggesting in section 6 on page 154 are the new areas, if you like, for 3-4 assessment. What are the key issues that we believe need to be addressed? And this is quite high level. So, for example, we would be taking internal audit reports that scored limited assurance, because those are key areas that you should be considering and monitoring through. And any external reports that we've received, you would expect to see in there if there's anything of significance. And also some of the key areas that have come through those individual service assurance statements are highlighted in here. So the purpose is, A, is that reflective of where you think this authority is? Are we missing anything from an audit and governance point of view? And secondly, for you to be able to sort of adopt the draft so it goes through into the accounts, but also we can put this in stone then once you've approved it, and we can keep monitoring against progress in terms of those actions. I think that's it, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Committee, comments on this report? Councillor Goodman.
Well, thank you for that introduction. It certainly explains to me now in better detail, because this is a really I see it as a very important report. The one thing I was going to say was I think that you've done a really good job in the section 5. I think that's good in one document to see all the key issues. And on this item 6, is leisure not in there because it wasn't, unless I've missed it, because it was noted by, it's not been noted as an issue other than what was said today as a recommendation that we need to monitor the value, you know, the finances. That's one of the recommendations from Grant Thornton. But I couldn't see, and I'm quite happy to be proven wrong, is where leisure is in there, because I would suggest that may be quite a significant issue for us.
Simon.
I think that's a reasonable comment, Chair, in terms of the committee. The position of expenditure on our leisure contract was highlighted by the peer review. Members have taken that forward in terms of significant amount of work. So I think that probably is a key issue that you'd want to keep track of.
And also, should we add waste? Because to me, those two are big beasts. That
Waste in terms of what?
Well, we're looking at waste at the moment with the contract negotiations and the fact that we know there's going to be a liability or a risk to us this year because of the contract. We are doing some really good work on waste, but I'm wondering, should the audit be monitoring that as well? Because it's going to affect finances.
This specifically looks at the annual governance. So are we governing waste? It would be a question, not, you know, and I think the answer to that is yes. I don't think there is a particular challenge that's been raised about the governance of waste. That would be my personal view, but Simon, if we can just respond to that first, please. Yeah.
I would echo your comments. That's what I was going to say. In terms, it is a risk for the authority, but lots of work happening. But in terms of the governance arrangements, I think actually it's probably a very strong area of ours, to be honest.
Okay, but the point is well made about inclusion of leisure.
Yep.
If we can add that, please. Yeah. Councillor Barlow? No. Nothing? Okay. Any other comments on this? Okay, if there are no other proposals or amendments to this, then move on to the recommendation, which is to consider if the draft annual governance statement reflects the position of the council to review existing and new actions identified in the statement, with the proviso that we add a comment on LED. Please, Debbie, that would be ideal. Do we have a...
With that recommendation, apologise for coming in, is that we are agreeing it, but does it have to be agreed by full council or cabinet? It doesn't say it here, or is it just for us?
I believe so. I think it then just goes for signature by the leader of the council and the chief executive.
Sorry, Chair, but also your point about the waste management, big important risk for the council, LED, but we're certainly scrutinising and doing LED as much as we are the waste management. So what's the difference?
With microphone, sorry.
What we're saying is, with leisure, it's been identified as a governance issue, whereas with the waste, it's not been identified as a governance issue because of the excellent work they're doing. That's my understanding.
This isn't a risk review.
Yeah.
This is a governance review. The two are different. Okay, that's the reason to that. Okay, so we have the recommendation. Do we have a proposer for that, please? Colin, yeah, Councillor Brown. Seconder, Councillor Levine. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to item 17, Audit and Governance Forward Plan. And we move over to Forward Plan. Great. Thank you for that. So we have a forward plan. It's been distributed under item 17. Are there any comments on it, or is anything glaring missing? I would say on the agenda for today, we had an absolute coming together of all sorts of things all at the same time, and I'm hoping that in the next meetings that we don't have quite as much on the same agenda. The backstop accounted for an awful lot of it. So actually, I'll mention it now. Yeah. The external auditors have proposed a change of date for the next meeting. So it's currently the 16th of January. They are proposing to postpone that by 2 weeks. Now, there is a housing review board in the morning of the 30th of January. So we would be looking at the afternoon of the 30th of January. Would that suit everybody? Well, that's a good question. Okay, we'll take that offline rather than try and coordinate diaries now. But you can probably expect that meeting to move at some point, probably by around 2 weeks. Okay.
There is one item to add, sorry, Chair.
In Libby's items, she stated that I would be bringing the whistleblowing policy. So can you put it in for January, please, to make sure that I do actually get it done? Thank you.
Thank you. That will be added to the forward plan for January. Thank you. Right. Noted, Debbie. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes, of course.
Chair, I've just done a quick check of meetings that are already booked, as well as HRB in the morning, as a scrutiny committee in the evening. So I don't think that date will work, but we'll obviously try and find a best solution.
No. Thank you, Councillor Goodman. You can keep your good ideas to yourself. Right, we'll coordinate diaries because there's some external, people to involve in that as well. So we'll coordinate diaries, get back to you. Okay, so the recommendation is to note the forward plan and add to it as we just have. Yep. Proposer, Councillor Levine, seconder, Councillor Brown. All those in favour, unanimous. Thank you very much. Right. For the next item, I need a vice chair, and we have no vice chair. So I'm looking for a volunteer to act as temporary vice chair. Councillor Brown, willing to be vice chair? Okay, you have to read, well, we have to vote on it first. All those in favour of Councillor Brown being a vice chair for this meeting? Thank you. That's unanimous. Councillor Brown, you will be given a short piece of text now by my glamorous assistant to read out. I'm right. 1970s again. Okay, so over to you, Councillor Brown.
Under Section 100A, Section 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public, including the press, be excluded from the meeting as exempt information of the description set out on the agenda is likely to be disclosed, and on balance, the public interest is in discussing the item in private session. Part B.
Thank you. All those in favour of moving to Part B? And that's 4. Any against? 1 against. Any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. That's carried. That brings the public section of our meeting to an end, and I would like to thank everyone here for taking part. Now ask the Vice Chair to formally move us into private session, please. We'll just have a short pause whilst we stop the stream. Thanks.